Often when we want to move shapes, we find that the shapes snap. And in an earlier video, we looked at the fact that we could go to View and we could go to Visual Aids and we could tell it not to snap. And so we could take those options off. And in fact, we could take off the snap full stop on this side and it would turn all the snap options off. So this way, things don't snap to the grid or to guides, they flow nicely. So when you drag a shape, it moves nice and smoothly without snapping all over the place. So I highly recommend that. But the other thing that's important to know is just how to nudge things. You can use your arrow keys and move things, but sometimes they don't always go where you want them to go. So sometimes you just want to nudge it. And so that's the Shift key and then using the arrow keys. And see how it just nudges it in nice small little increments? So turn off all your snap options, use your mouse, but if it's an incredibly busy diagram, use your arrow keys, and if the arrow keys aren't going in small enough movements, then shift arrow keys will really make them move in small increments. Now the other thing you've got is the ability to rotate shapes should you ever need to. So I've got a shape selected here, and if I was to go to my Home tab, I actually have the option to rotate this particular shape. And so if I wanted to rotate the shape, I'd just go to the Position button in the Arrange group, and under the Position button you'll find that there's a number of rotate shape options. Rotate right 90 degrees, left 90 degrees, flip it to vertically or flip it horizontally. So you can rotate your shapes using these options here, and even as I rest on them, it's actually giving me a heads up on what that looks like. The other thing you can do is also rotate the entire diagram to the right or to the left. So if you had the entire diagram selected, it would rotate it. But you can also go Control R, which rotates to the right, and Control L, which rotates to the left. You can also use this particular place handle at the top of each shape. You'll find that there's this little curvatured shape, and you can drag that to the right, and you can drag it to the left and rotate that way. So it is possible for you to rotate shapes should you need to. Now the other thing that we've looked at briefly in earlier videos is the width and the height of a shape. So I'm going to click on, say, this shape here. And when I look down here in the lower left of my status bar, the width of this shape is 38.439 and the height is 23.064. And as I click on each shape, it gives me the height and width and even the angle, the degree of rotation. But if I want to set all the shapes to exactly a certain height and a certain width, and I don't want to use my mouse, then it would be really good to bring up a certain task pane which is dedicated to width and height. Let's go to the View tab in the ribbon and go to Task Panes and Size and Position. Size and Position is this wee window here, and you can move it by its title or using this mouse pointer. So I can move this, and it tells me if I click on any shape what its width, its height, and its degree of rotation is. X and Y are the XY coordinates where it's positioned on the page, which isn't so useful, I find. Now if I'd like to, I can click these two shapes, for example, just using my Shift key, and I might set the height of them to exactly 39 and the width to exactly 45. And so you can actually control that, and I could even say rotate them 10 degrees or minus 10 degrees, that sort of thing, or back to 0. So if you want to check out the dimensions of a particular shape, this might be a useful window to bring up, and you just select a shape and it tells you. And if you want to select a group of shapes, perhaps this one, hold the Shift, this one and this one, I could set them all to 52 and 31. And so you can actually make sure they're all consistently the same height, width and angle, which is really useful. You can also move this window and place it, say, in this bottom corner here, or put it over on this right hand side here, or move it down below here, or just have it floating. So it is movable. So I might move it and just pop it over here, size and position. Then it's just sitting here nicely. The other thing you've got is the importance of being able to zoom in and zoom out. And in fact, this is an opportunity to probably introduce you to another window. If on the View tab you go to Task Panes, there's a window or a task pane called Pan and Zoom. I'm going to click this, and here it is here, and just move it up. Now the idea here is that you can zoom in and you can zoom out using this little slider. So you're zooming. To pan, you basically drag around something and you create a frame. Now depending on your version, it'll be a blue or a red frame. The bigger the frame, the more you're zoomed out and looking at all those objects. The smaller the frame, the more you've zoomed in, and then you can move it around and you can pan and zoom literally around a diagram. So it's not really for me, but it is something that you can do, and I can just delete that. Oops, undo. You can merge these two windows. Let me just grab the size and position window and put it on top of the pan and zoom. And now because I put it on top of, I can switch between pan and zoom, size and position. If I pull the size and position, I can drag it out, and there I've just pulled it out. And you can resize it. Or if I drop pan and zoom on top of size and position, I've just merged the two of them together. And I can then move that combined merged window over to here, and I can switch between pan and zoom or size and position. And I'll just take it back to midway, 98%, or actually I'll take it to fit page. Excuse me. So there is the ability to pan and zoom as well. It's not a big thing I use, but I do use the size and position. Now it's also important to be able to align shapes to ensure that they are aligned accurately to the left or to the top or through the middle, etc. Let me just create a situation where they're not quite lined up. I might just drag the shape down a bit and drag the shape up a little bit. So these two are now not in alignment. Now the one that you click on first is important. I want these two shapes to align to the top, and I want them to align to the top of this one on the right hand side. So I click this one first, hold the Control or the Shift key, and click this one second. Notice the border around the first one is thicker, so that's sort of like my guide. Now when I go to Home and I go to Align and I say Align to the top, they will align to the top of the one I first clicked. So the order that you click them is important, and now these are aligned to the top. But I can see there's a kink in that line, which means these three here are not aligned through the center. So I'm going to lasso these three. I'm going to go to Align, and these ones, looking at the picture, you want to align center. And even if you rest on it, you can see they sort of move. So align center means they're all perfectly through the center. And I'll lasso these three and do the same, but now I'm going to use the shortcut key, F8. F8 is the shortcut key for Align. And I'm going to align these through the center. And OK. Oops, and that didn't work. F8. I will actually align them. That should align through the center, and OK. What's happened is I haven't completely selected the middle shape. So when I've lassoed, I haven't picked that up. So you've really got to be careful. So I'm going to lasso again and right around them. So I pick up all three. And then when I go F8 and say align through the center, and OK, that'll align them. So make sure when you lasso that you pick them all up correctly. F8 is the shortcut key for Align, and it's a really handy quick key. So lastly, I'd want to select these three and press F8 and ensure that they were going through the middle correctly, and OK. And so now I know everything's perfectly aligned. As far as distribution, we need to make sure that the gap is equal, perhaps between these three shapes, these two gaps here, or between these three shapes. Let's start by lassoing completely these three shapes here, and to handle the distribution I'm going to go to Position and I'm going to go Distribute Vertically. Now distribute vertically, you saw it move. Distribute vertically means that those three shapes, the gap between those two gaps between those three shapes is equidistant. So I'm going to distribute vertically, and I'm going to do the same to these distribute vertically. And so those gaps are equidistant between those two. And I might do it between these three as well. Distribute horizontally. And so I know the gaps are equidistant. Cool. And my lines are all straight, so I know everything's perfectly distributed and aligned. So important to align your shapes. You don't have to use your iometer. You can actually use the alignment option up here on your home tab, or F8 is a very cool key for aligning. Or making sure that they're distributed evenly. Just go to your position button here and you've got the option to distribute vertically or horizontally depending on what shapes you've got selected. There is also the ability to group and ungroup shapes should you ever want to. For example, I recently had a request for a shape that didn't exist on the stencil, so we grabbed a process and stretched it, and then we grabbed another process and put it inside of it. And it had the text, for example, WBS, work breakdown structure, and I'll just grow that. And so that was a shape that they wanted. So we selected both of those shapes, lassoed both of them, and we grouped them. And so up here on your home tab in the arrange group, you have the group button. And so that is now one shape instead of two shapes sitting on top of each other. And so I can resize them now and move them and copy and paste them as if they were one shape. If I need to ungroup them to change them in any way, I can go to group and ungroup, and now they're two separate shapes again, and I can pull this one out again. So you have the ability to group and ungroup to form shapes as well.